Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Let's pick up where we left off. We were talking about different theories of possible worlds. So we had gone through and critiqued the conceptualist theory of worlds, which tries to understand possibility just in terms of concepts in the mind. A problem with that is that you seem to need some kind of universal conceptualizer like God to make that work. And there was a combinatorial theory. That one says that non-actual worlds are possible combinations of fundamental building blocks that exist in the actual world. So unicorns as possible beings would be possible arrangements of actual particles into a unicorn structure. That one could run into trouble if you allowed for the possibility of worlds with more or different basic entities. Like a world with alien, unfamiliar basic particles, or a world with Cartesian souls, assuming you don't have any in the actual world. Everyone tracking with me here? Any questions about it? No. Yeah, and then there was the abstract worlds theory. So that one seems to be committed to a rich ontology of abstract propositional entities or abstract properties. So on that theory, a possible world is either a very complex property that could be exemplified. The actual world would then be some very complex property which is exemplified. Or it could be a very long conjunction of propositions or states of affairs, possible states of affairs. So according to this theory, only actual items have any reality. Other possible universes containing possible beings and such are hypothetical. So they could exist, but they don't actually exist. What exists are these propositions, propositions about them. So there are false propositions about unicorns that exist, and these are abstract entities. So we're not saying that everything is in the mind, because these propositions are supposed to exist extramentally as abstract beings. Nor are we saying that everything has to be constructed out of basic building blocks. Some of these propositions could concern items that can't be constructed out of any physical basic building blocks, like Cartesian minds or something like that.
So you could say abstract substance.
Abstract substance?
In other words, these are things that are still substance, even though they're abstract. They're not just related to mind.
Well, yeah, they're not mind dependent. It doesn't necessarily make them substances in the sense of being physical objects. Or something like that, in that sense.
Okay.
But yeah, they're more in another sense of substance.
They're entities.
They're beings. Yeah. So in common discourse, a substance is an entity that's concrete and has certain defining marks, like the ability to undergo change, intrinsic change. And, generally, it has either physical or at least mental qualities. These propositions aren't like that. They're abstract realities. But they're held to be beings in themselves, which can exist apart from the mind. So that distinguishes it from the conceptual theory.
Conceptual.
It's also different than the combinational theory because there might be propositions about things that are not made up out of basic physical building blocks in the actual world, like souls and like particles that don't exist in our world, and so on. Okay, so that's your abstract worlds theory. So on this theory, worlds aren't actual places you could visit. They're abstract models of possible realities that could exist.
So what's this world?
This world is a unique world that's actual. So the beings in
Only actual world?
yeah, it's the only actual world. Yeah. It's the only world that obtains. The others possibly obtain but don't.
Is it the only actual world because we experience it?
No,
and know
it's the only actual world because it's the one that is exemplified or which obtains.
So exemplified and which obtains is keywords to that?
Yeah. Yeah. If you think of a world as a very rich property, then it's the only world property that is exemplified. If you think of it more as a propositional thing, which is more natural for me anyway, then you're talking about the only one of the possible worlds which obtains. Now, other worlds may have certain parts that obtain, but they don't obtain overall. Right?
What would that look like?
Well, it would just be like they resemble this world a lot, but there's some differences.
Okay.
Like the only difference is that there's a frog on this desk right now. But other than that, it's all exactly the same. So that world's going to look a lot like the actual world. But there's one thing in it that makes it overall not obtain or not be exemplified, that frog, because that doesn't actually exist.
It's like, see the difference between these two photos, and it's like one detail?
Yeah, one detail's enough to make that world not actual.
Not actual.
Yeah, but it's still fully possible.
So these worlds are possible, but they're not actual. So within them being possible are just abstract worlds, or like what's the?
Yeah, they're abstract. Yeah,
Okay,
as
because
a
they're
whole.
abstract because they are possible and not
But
actual.
because they're merely possible. Yeah. Yeah, the actual world is possible, but it's also obtains, which makes it actual. Yeah.
And so these worlds, I'm just trying to understand better. So
Yeah.
these worlds are possible insofar that they're not like logically impossible.
Right.
Like a
Yeah.
triangular, like they can't have a triangular sphere.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not just like a world where like I don't want to say anything can happen, but like logical inconsistency.
They can't happen, but anything else can.
Okay.
Oh, so they don't have logical consistency as
No.
well?
No. If they had like round spherical cubes in them and stuff, then they'd be they're impossible.
Yeah.
So they're not possible worlds. Yeah. So anything we can consistently imagine will exist in some other world, but it doesn't actually exist. Okay, so now we go to the concrete worlds theory, and that's basically put forward by David Lewis initially. So he suggests that Leibniz may have had something like this in mind. It's hard to confirm that. According to Lewis, possible worlds are concrete entities, and all the things in them exist, though they're not actual. The concrete things in the other worlds exist just as much as the things in this world do. They're just not actual because by actual we mean the things that exist in our world. But there are the people who exist in these other worlds are real flesh and blood people, and they believe that their world is the actual world, and they're not wrong, because what they mean is the world in which I'm located contains all these things, and that's true. So actuality for Lewis is sort of like an indexical term, like this or that. It's pointing to something. So there's only one actual world from our point of view. That's our world. But the other points of view are just as real.
Can you repeat that again?
Yeah, there's only one actual world from our point of view. That's the world that we're in. That's what we mean by actual, the world we're in. But people who live in these other worlds, the other possible worlds, because there are people there too, they're not just abstract entities or anything. They're actual people like us. They exist in these separate worlds. None of the worlds can ever communicate with each other.
But they're both still concrete.
Yeah, they're all concrete. They're made of concrete things, not out of properties or relations or propositions or something like that. Made of actual flesh and blood people and creatures and rocks and stones and stuff like that. So each one is a universe unto itself.
Would Kant say that these are things that are beyond knowing, the unknowable, even though they're concrete worlds?
Well, that's a good question. We seem to be able to say some things about them, so they don't seem to be totally unknowable.
Unknowable.
They're not unknowable, even though we can't causally interact with them. We seem to be able to say like what's in some of them and what's not in some of them. Right? There are no round squares in any of those worlds.
So that's no.
And there are other people just like us, except for one detail or another. There's something just like this table, except it has a frog on it, one of these other ones, and so on. So it seems like
But does
we know to a large extent what's in them, but not total.
But we couldn't say they obtained though.
No, because they're concrete things, though. We can say that they exist, however, right? They exist. Yeah.
So what about, okay, if both of these worlds are concrete, our world and this other
Yeah.
possible world.
Right, with a frog. Yeah.
Right, would we still exist on the same spatio-temporal?
No, we're in
plane?
separate space-time continuums.
So that world can also exist like 5 minutes in the past, and that could be the one difference between us?
Yeah.
Time.
Uh-huh. Or your time could run more quickly or more slowly there, all kinds of stuff.
So all of our judgments are kind of like just based off of what we can claim on our immediate world. So
Yeah.
like, to claim that like that world's 5 minutes in the past, I'm sure that on their world they would claim that our world is 5 minutes in the future.
Yes.
So it's all relative from our perspective on
Yes.
our world. Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So you said, I believe you said that those in the other concrete worlds, the other possible worlds, they cannot interact with other worlds. And so
No, we can't travel there and they can't travel here.
Yeah, they can't. We can't travel there. They can't travel here. But I understand that we can make some judgments about
Yeah.
them from here. From
We
where
can.
are.
Yeah.
So is it possible that if someone is that we could judge that there's another world where they are able to go to other worlds, but just not this world? And so would that mean that they
No.
can make judgments about
No,
their world?
that's not one of the things that could, that's one of those impossible things, like a round square.
And why is that impossible? I don't know if I'm being like obtuse or anything.
Well, because that's the whole like nature of possibility that he's explaining, and one of his axioms is that individuals like you and I are world bound. The abstract theory allows the same individual literally to exist in infinitely many worlds. So there's a world in which you're sitting there now, then there's which is the actual world, and there's a world in which you're sitting in the next chair over, which is a merely possible world, and you exist in both of those worlds, and in a third world, and a fourth world, and so on. But on the Lewis view, since you're talking about concrete individual things making up these worlds, you can only be in one, the one that you're in. So if we say that if we say that it's possible for you not to be sitting there now,